Hello folks, today we're going to talk about using Photoshop to do some light retouching for blemishes and wrinkles, and also to do some specialized um, darkening and lightening of certain areas to an image. Here we have an image of a young person who has some blemishes. It's fairly natural for everybody to have blemishes, and one of the key things for Photoshop retouchers is to make the images look natural. And this is a tool that's very easy to go overboard, and soon your the person, the subject in the photo, can look more like an avatar or an animation still image. That's something we want to try to avoid. And the key for me is for retouching is really to remove or hide the things that are temporary. So, such as moles or birthmarks, those are inherently part of the person, and I don't want to necessarily remove that because that's uniquely who they are with those moles and birthmarks on their body. So I kind of keep it just to things that are temporary. Um, as always, I always duplicate the background copy and I have it separated in a folder because again, in case I do anything wrong or I have a backup to fall back onto. So that way, it's just a nice safety feature to have. So, so we have a background layer. We have it in a folder, and now we're going to actually just add a new layer right on top of that. And the new layer is transparent. There's nothing on it right now. And I want to make sure that I have that layer highlighted right here. I'm going to go over here and grab my healing brush. The healing brush has actually multiple options. It has a spot healing brush, and we're going to use just a regular healing brush tool. And there's a couple others, but this is the most effective tool. It operates very similar to the clone stamp tool, except for the fact that the clone stamp tool really is just a exact duplicate of your target or your area somewhere else. This one here, the healing brush, actually has an algorithm that kind of copies what your target will be and then places it and mixes it with where you're landing. So I'll give you an example here. And the key thing is that to make sure you have your foreground background swatch as in black and white, so you can switch that easily between whichever way you need to go. And then in order to make sure that your foreground background is black and white, you can just hit the D key on your keyboard and that will go for default foreground and background colors for black and white. But when we come in here, I generally don't want to zoom in more than 100%. If you look at the lower right or lower left corner of your image, there's a percentage scale that tells you your zoom in, because once you get zoomed in this close, there's no necessity of being this close for blemishes, because then you need to be able to see the image as a whole, so that way you're not going a little overboard, so you can kind of watch how the differences change. So I want to pick up here on the forehead here. You can see here that my healing brush has a circle. It's looking for an active target that you want to use. So oftentimes what I'll do is I'll hit the Alt key on the keyboard and I will select this area right here. And you want to use a target that is very similar to where it needs to land, okay? Especially the surrounding areas. So I want to pick a target right about here, and I will come back over here to the area I want to change, and I'm going to just lightly put that on there like that. And I can do before and after, before and after. You can see that it actually kind of lightens it up there. Oh, let me back up one moment. When I'm in the layers and I have my healing brush, I want to make sure that my layer sample is going to be current and below. So what's going to happen is that the sample that I'm going to grab here is from below, but it's going to apply it onto the layer. So it's actually copying it onto the layer. And what you do is you just effectively go around and you just kind of blend it in a little bit. And again, the healing brush, you can change the size. I generally don't want to use a healing brush larger than the target I need to clean because it just gets a little unwieldy. So I kind of keep it about the same size, maybe just a little bit bigger, but not too much. And again, what's the healing brush is doing is taking a sample from the bottom image and then copying it and placing it into the layer itself. I'll show you what I mean in a second. And you go around and you just kind of fixing little blemishes. And in this case, I would come over here. If you see these little black flecks, these are part of her mascara that kind of flaked off of her eyelashes, and I'll just clean those up a little bit. Okay, that takes care of that. This young person doesn't have many wrinkles, so there's not a lot to kind of work on here, but we're going to do it anyway, just for example purposes. The wrinkles you can use the same kind of process, but this time I'm going to take the target or the sample from here, and I want to drop it right on top of the wrinkle, and then you can just left click and hold, and then just hold that click and then drag it along if you want. And maybe just a different target over here. I kind of blend it in just a little bit, and you can do again. You can always go back to the history panel here as they back up a couple of steps and see what it looks like before and what it looks like after. So it's just slightly blending it in there. Now, as I talked about earlier, you're sampling from the bottom image, but you're actually applying it to the top image. So if I were to turn off this bottom layer, you will see that there are these little marks here, and those are the little things that I fixed, all the little blemishes. Ultimately, it'll build and get more and more of those little marks everywhere. But really what it's doing is it's blending in from the top layer to the bottom layer. So what this is that it's non-destructive to the background layer. Again, the background layer is the master layer. You don't want to do too many changes to that because it ultimately rearranges the pixels, and hence why we work everything on layers so we don't impact the original image whatsoever. All right, there's that. And then you'd spend time kind of going through the face and getting all the blemishes. These are moles, so we keep those. There's definitely a blemish here. Maybe I'll take it from over here a little bit. And also what it's doing is sampling this and then kind of reading that and kind of making a little patch there that kind of hides it just a little bit more. Now the next step is that we're going to do what's called a dodge and a burn. This is a way of lightening and darkening certain areas of the image. It's a very common technique that was rooted in film photography and darkroom process. Burning would mean that you're adding more light to an image, which makes it darker, and then dodging means you're holding back the light, so it makes certain areas lighter. In this case, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to kind of darken the area around the edges of her face so it concentrates more of the lighting towards the center of her face. By doing so, you want to add another layer and come down here and just add a layer. And in this time, we have our black and white swatch here ready to go for our foreground background. We're going to switch this layer and switch the activity of this layer to say soft light. And you can also choose overlay or hard light, but I like the soft light because it actually just adds just a little touch of the effect rather than the hard light makes it really a lot more application of the dodge and burn. You just want to use a soft light because that way you can build upon it and build it up rather than having it all done at one time. Photoshop is a lot of little techniques and little moves. So when we have the soft light selected here, this time we're going to use our painting brush. And the brush, we're just going to paint on everything we have or what we need. Again, you can choose a size, you can choose the hardness of the edge, and I'm going to use a big one today. I'll leave it right there. Kind of give you a full value here. And I want to turn up the flow up to 100% so you can kind of see what happens, and then I'll show you the more appropriate way to use it. So if I were to come in here, I have the foreground is black, and I just kind of trace over it a little bit with my brush. You can see that the area gets darker and darker. A little bit too dark for my taste. Alright, again, this is just for effect. I want to back out and undo that, and I'm going to switch the foreground background, and then you see the area gets lighter when the white is now on the top. Okay, now this is a bit too much. I would recommend taking the flow down to about 1 to 2%, and then paint it on accordingly, and over a period of time. Again, you can add things to it a little bit at a time. So, whoops, going the wrong way. I want to actually make this darker on the sides. And the thing about Photoshop is subtleties, and learning to kind of read the subtleties as you're working along. I'm just going to do this quite a bit here so I can kind of pick up on it. And then if I do a before and after, here's the after, there's before, after, before. So this is why we use the flow rate very low, so that we can add on to it as you go. So ultimately, Photoshop, again, just like we do selections, is a lot of detail work. It's a lot of looking at everything, examining it closely. I want to give you this kind of process here, and again, I'll turn off the layer so you can kind of see what happens here. Whoops. Let me darken this up a little bit so you can see what happens on the layer panels when I do the work. Okay, now I'll turn off the background layer so you can kind of see what the work layer looks like. So this is the one for the blemishes and the wrinkles. And this is the one where we're darkening or lightening something. It's not adding anything to the, or it's not necessarily adding parts of the image. It's actually just helping the light kind of naturally come in and darken or lighten a part of the area. And then I can reverse that if I want to lighten the eyes a little bit. Let me just do that here while we're here. And it's not changing any of the color, it's just changing the density of it. It's kind of like using the curves, but except that you get to use it in very specific areas. You can see her eyes are just a little bit lighter than before. And then I'll switch it to darken her here, around here. So it kind of makes a little bit more dramatic effect on her image. And let's look at the start of the work at the beginning. Oops, not that one. Went too far. Here. So you can see that her eyes are lightened, but the edges around her head is a little bit darker. So I'll give you an example of what it looks like in the end. Oops. Turn one on here. There we go. So this is the one that I kind of did beforehand, before I came into class. You can see here, I'll turn it all off. And then here's the after of the blemishes. So again, I took out a lot of the major blemishes around her face here. I can keep going a little bit. That's always the problem. You can always keep going, but sometimes you gotta just stop and say, oh, that looks pretty natural. And then here's the dodge and burn that I did for her. And then you can see that the edges around here is a little bit darker. I can probably darken a little bit more around here, in order to bring the emphasis to her eyes. There. And that's pretty much it. Being able to do blemishes and dodging and burning for various parts of an image. If you have any questions, feel free to let me know. Send me an email. Thanks very much.